The rumour mill is alight with what looks like some pretty accurate information regarding Nvidia's next generation of GPUs. But it begs the question, should you wait for RTX 4000 series? It's a question that a lot of gamers are going to be asking themselves in 2022, with Nvidia's new GPU releases reportedly just months away. Let's take a look at the rumours, dissect what might be true and what might not, and figure out if you should really wait for Nvidia's next generation release. Now, it might seem crazy to recommend people wait for a new release of GPUs, just as the current 30 series starts to come into stock. But is it really that crazy? We're approaching Nvidia's key September window. Roughly every September, they announce and bring to market a new generation of GPUs. This generation defines their GPU design philosophy for the next 2 or 2.5 years. Back in September of 2020, they released 30 series, 3070, 3080, and the behemoth that was the 3090 formed their launch lineup. And those cards delivered such impressive performance that no one could actually go and buy one. But Nvidia at the time knew the release would be popular and put more supply into the market than they ever had before. But simply put, it wasn't enough. Obviously, difficulties with GPU mining and supply chains in a post-COVID world had a massive impact, but that's a discussion for another video. Since then, they've released the 3060 Ti and later 3060 tier of GPUs, followed by the 3070 Ti, 80 Ti and 3050, creating a lineup that in a normal market would have a card for everyone, all the way from $250 or $300 right to the $1,500 mark and even higher. But the changes with the new Ada lineup of cards look to be incredibly impressive. Take this chart from videocards.com. Now, it looks confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you. On the bottom, you've got 30 series, or Ampere, starting with the GA102, which represents the RTX 3090s, heading all the way down to the GA107. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that there's less numbers here than there are actual cards. And that's because multiple cards will actually share the same chip, the same die of GPU. Let's take, for example, the RTX 3090. That uses a GA102, as does the RTX 3080. It's the memory size, those TMUs, RT cores that make the difference. And Nvidia will package what is essentially the same original die up in different flavours. But that's not to say we can't compare them apples to apples with the rumoured new release. Let's take the RTX 40 series section of the graph. Look at the AD102. That's the next gen equivalent of our current RTX 3080 and 3090. So the 4090 and the 4080. You can see here that we've actually got 144 SMs. That's not quite double, but about 80% more than the current generation. Our CUDA cores are jumping dramatically by around about 80% once again. And while the memory bus stays the same, our level 2 cache intriguingly increases a huge amount. Now, the cache is what creates the buffer between the GPU processor itself and your main GPU memory. Say you'd have 8, 10 or 16 gigabytes. Cache exists as a really fast form of memory that helps to bridge that gap. And the next gen look to have a hell of a lot more. And that lines up with other rumours we've seen around the next gen GPUs having far more cores than the current gen. If you look at the CUDA cores alone, we've got 8,000 more CUDA cores here, and they all need a lot more level 2 cache, because more cores is no good if you haven't got the memory bandwidth to serve them with information. If you don't keep your cores fed with data to process, they're not going to be particularly useful for you. And the improvements spread down the stack as well. The AD103, which will likely represent the the RTX 4070, has the same amount of SMs as what our current gen 3080 has. And the pattern continues across our CUDA cores, across our memory bus width, and our level 2 cache, and once again is hugely improved. Now, across the lineup, these look to be some very impressive spec jumps from Nvidia. But it's worth noting that these specifications that have been leaked from a fairly reliable source might just indicate the maximum potential of the chip. Remember that point I told you earlier? The 3090 and 3080 both have a GA102, but they are different in performance. And it all depends how Nvidia configure that board. Aside from the die in the middle, how is the rest of the GPU formed and made up? And they do this for obvious reasons. More memory costs more money to put on a card, so you might want that higher end physical GPU chip, but actually less memory if you're looking for a lower use case. And that's why this chart doesn't include stuff like video memory, because that is easily specified by the manufacturer. But all of these potential performance improvements don't come without a catch. These cards will very likely need PCIe Gen 5 on your motherboard, not only to actually saturate enough data between the card and the board itself. Remember, a more powerful GPU needs a powerful interface to actually give you that performance in the first place, and it will likely need a higher degree of power that can be delivered by a PCIe Gen 5 slot on your motherboard. And that's because the rumours are that these cards are going to be hefty when it comes to power consumption. Now, once again, the rumours could just be linked to the GPU's maximum potential. The 3090 and 3080 have a big difference in TDP. They use a different amount of power, despite being that same GPU chip. And that's all about how the board and the chip is configured. But it's not unlikely that you will need a much more beefy power supply, perhaps with a new connection standard 2 and a higher end motherboard to make these GPUs work. What's more, Nvidia are only likely to release their top 3 end cards at the launch of 40 series. The 3050 isn't going to get replaced probably until this time in 2 years' time. And the same goes with the 3060 and 60 Ti, cards that got released much later than the 3080 and 70. Manufacturers always do this. They release the highest end, high margin cards first, while the yield on those actual GPU dies is smaller. Remember, production has got to ramp up once again from a lower level to a higher level. But could this just mean a repeat of 2020? Well, maybe, but probably not. 2020 was a basket case scenario. Demand for GPUs was the highest it had ever been, and retailers here in the UK were telling me they'd had more cards than ever, but they were just selling out. Supply chain issues globally caused them huge problems too. And while there are some rumours of the Russia and Ukraine conflict causing issues with GPU supply, they don't seem to be the kind of issues we were facing 12 or 18 months ago. What's more, Nvidia will have been prepping for this, and the likes of them and AMD, who of course themselves will be bringing new GPUs to the market, have been beefing up these supply chains. They do not want a repeat of what happened in 2020. And with high energy prices reducing mining demand, alongside crypto crashes, GPU demand from scalpers this time around should be a lot lower. Will the cards still probably sell out in the first few weeks or even couple of months? I'm going to say so. There's still a huge amount of demand for GPUs in the market. But if current trends are anything to go by, this situation is getting a lot better. Now, James, these rumours are great, but should I wait for a next gen of GPUs? To put it bluntly, probably not. But it depends. If you're looking for the highest end performance, a 3080, 80 Ti or 3090, it's probably worth hanging out for just a few months, if your current setup is half decent. But if you're in the market for a 3050, 60, or even like a 70 Ti, I wouldn't bother. Those cards are fairly new to the market, and Nvidia wouldn't be releasing the rumoured 3090 Ti if it was then going to make it obsolete in just a few months' time. Who's to say these new GPUs as well won't be without price increases? Plus, it looks to me like RTX 30 series, at least on the high end, will be one of the last Nvidia releases to be widely compatible with current gen hardware. Most of you could slot in a 3060 Ti or 70 to an existing Ryzen rig from a couple of years ago, and not really see a huge amount of CPU bottlenecking. But in future, you may need to pick up a PCIe Gen 5 motherboard, something AMD haven't even brought out yet and will likely come with their new CPUs, which we're also expecting soon. And a beefier power supply is also going to set you back probably another £150 or dollars. There are huge factors to consider, but look at where you sit in the market. If you want the best of the best and you're going to spend $2,000 on a GPU or PC build and be disappointed in 6 months' time when it gets replaced, wait out until September or October time. But if you're expecting a new shiny entry or mid-level card in just a few months, I think you will be disappointed. So go ahead and look at the current 30 series lineup or what AMD currently have on offer. Either way, it's exciting times, and I'm looking forward to getting hands-on with new GPUs that hopefully this time all of us can actually buy.